Hello there. My name is Shanth Koka, and my project name is I Need a Hero. I'm working on this project solo, so I'm pretty much responsible for all the things you're about to see. All right, so project concept. I wanted to somehow combine voxels, VR, and tower defense. All right, for all the tech. So first thing I'm going to talk about is the entity component system I came up with. Um, Let me go to the code. All right, so here's a generic component. This is all commented out, but it's just examples of the functions that components may have. Um, and then as for entities, this is kind of the meat of the whole ECS system. Any subclass of an entity can override this and register whatever components they want to opt into. So an example might be a player might want a health component, and so they'll have to specify that they want a health component. And then everything up here is pretty much set up for the components. And down here, you can see that all of those basic Godot calls just get forwarded to each of those little components and just call those three methods I showed you beforehand. Yeah, and now I'll show you an example of an actual entity that I have in the game, the player entity, and also the VR player entity. Okay, before I get into this, my game has two modes to play. There's the VR mode, but you can also play on a computer with the keyboard and mouse. So that's why you're seeing these two separate entities. One of them is for VR, one of them's not for VR, but they sort of show like how this ECS system lets me reuse a lot of my code that should be in both parts of the game. Yeah, so you can see like the player has a health component, like I mentioned earlier, inventory, block preview, and also just a controller and an interaction handler. So the VR player entity also has an inventory, but it doesn't need like a health component or even like the first person controller parts. That's not necessary either. But it does have just a completely different interact handler. Yeah, the reason for this is because the VR version of the game is a tabletop scenario, while the keyboard mouse is a first person. So they both needed different ways of interacting with the environment. Like the first person is shooting out a raycast to see where the block preview should show up, while the VR version is quite literally taking the position of your thumb and index finger in space and using that for the block preview. Um, yeah, yeah. Next up, VR and hand tracking. So I just wanted to explain how VR works in Godot. Godot has a bunch of tools and plugins already to expose the like VR APIs to you, and that includes hand tracking, where it makes nodes for every single joint and bone in your hand, and those are gonna be synced up to your hand movements in real time. So it's pretty much like all on you to detect like what pose the hand is making or where what it's doing and whatnot. Um, yeah. Next up, A-Star navigation. That was one of the core technologies of my project. Uh, Here's the code if you want to pause and look through it, but it's very similar to a typical A-Star algorithm. It does rely on the voxel system, so it was a lot easier to think about in my opinion. And I even got this little cool picture showing like all the paths that were planned out by the A-Star navigation system. Thought that was pretty cool. Okay, demo time. Um, I don't need to explain the picture though. Okay. So I kind of have two demos, the keyboard mouse version, which is, I'll show you that right now. You can see I have inventory at the bottom. I'm just going to place some blocks here. And there's the enemy that I have at the moment. And it's going to walk up to the base, pathfind around these blocks, and try to go and break it. As for the VR version, I'm using side quests to stream content from my VR headset to my computer. That way I can record it. Hopefully y'all can see all of this. So this right here is Oculus and their interface, but I have my app ready to run right there. There it is. Okay, so all of the stuff you can see right now, that's my room. I am making this a pass-through game, so it like has the background of your room there, and then it just overlays all of the graphics on top. Okay, first thing I need to do is tell my game where my table is. So I have this little thing set up where I just place my hands on the table and click these buttons. That should be the last one. Okay, and once it knows the table, then it puts the game on your table. And yeah, now the only part I have implemented is just placing blocks, and there's no spawning enemies as of yet, but I can place blocks here. Um, yeah, and I thought it was pretty cool. Just I want to make it work with hand tracking, so forget the controllers; those are just sitting on the side. Um, Hopefully this works out. Yeah, that's the current state of my project. Thank you for watching.